I'm Yuri Levnik. I'm your instructor today. I was with the Uni for about 8 months, primarily down in Solitude. I've since moved on to Mercenary Coalition, but I'm coming back to teach this class because it's my favorite class. So today we're going to do Introduction to Wormholes, also known as an introduction to the spookier side of space. We'll talk a bit about wormholes, and then if you are in Mignon, Citadel 101, and you have time, you can come along for the practical, where we'll actually jump a couple of wormholes and see what wormholes in wormhole space are like in person. That's the plan for today. Currently we are on slide 1 in the presentation. If anybody is having trouble with the slides, could you give me an X in lecture.etechuni? Just type in X in lecture.etechuni and we'll try to get you sorted. Let's go ahead and flip to slide 2. Slide 2 in the slide deck. Go over a couple of class rules. There's not too many. Please do set your microphones to push to talk or mute yourself and mumble so that we don't have a lot of extra microphone noise while I'm trying to do the lecture here. Feel free to ask questions in lecture.etechuni. That's probably going to be the easiest place to ask questions, is to type them in there and then we'll answer them as we go through the class. If possible, put a Q at the front of your question just to help me make sure that I see it. And questions are welcome at any time. If it's a clarification about something that I'm saying that doesn't make sense, I'll probably try to answer it immediately. If it's more of an additional information, like what's the best way to get into Thera, we'll probably come back to that at the end of the class. And strongly recommended that you stay docked up in a station or citadel for safety during the class. There is no SRP, no ship replacement payments for people who get blown up during the class, so if you're out mining or whatever, just be careful. Question: can I ask completely unrelated questions? Answer: yes, and I won't answer them, so feel free. Easy, right? Let's go ahead and flip to slide 3. Let's flip to slide 3 in the slide deck. You should see class overview. So what we're going to cover today, we got a lot of topics to cover actually. Wormhole space we could spend 8 hours easily on wormhole space, but we won't do that today. We're going to do the sort of the quick and dirty version. So what we want to talk about is, what is wormhole space? We'll talk about finding wormholes, identifying wormholes, and mapping wormholes, and that's different from wormhole space. We'll get into that too. And then we'll talk about some unique wormhole and wormhole space mechanics, including mass, lifespan, and static wormholes. And we'll wrap up with a quick section on living versus day tripping in wormhole space. Let's go ahead and flip to slide 4. And you should be in slide 4 in the deck. You'll see what is wormhole space. Now I'm going to talk about wormhole space and wormholes today, so this is the first of 2 different topics. Wormhole space is 2,500 plus solar systems that do not have stargates. It's also known as J space, W space, even sometimes spooky space. You can only get into a wormhole space system via scannable wormholes, and those wormholes can lead anywhere. So they can lead into or out of wormhole space. They can also lead between 2 what we call known space systems. System security in wormhole space is always -1, so it's basically just like null security space. Warp disruption bubbles and bombs are allowed. There are no Concord or faction security police at all, so you can shoot somebody without any consequences. And wormhole space is split into 6 classes of wormholes, C1 through C6. The higher the class, the more dangerous the sites are. So a C1 wormhole site, you could probably go to a combat site and run that in like a catalyst or even a frigate. Whereas C6s, you need battleships to run those combat sites, and the rewards are a lot better, correspondingly, right? Speaking of rewards, wormhole space offers some really fantastic money-making opportunities. We'll talk about that a little bit at the tail end of the class, about how you can make money either day tripping or living in wormhole space. Let's go ahead and flip to slide 5. Alright, so you should be on slide 5. Sohn, thank you. Sohn has asked, for terminology, what do you call the sphere-like wormhole versus a system in JSpace? For the class, what I'm going to try to do is refer to the 2,500 systems that are not connected via stargates as wormhole space or JSpace or WSpace, mostly wormhole space. And then for the wormhole itself, which is, we'll get to that in a minute, it's like basically like a temporary stargate. I'm going to refer to those as wormholes. So it's a little confusing, but it'll make more sense as we go through the class, and if you get to attend the practical, I think it'll really click for you if you get a chance to come along with us. So right now we're talking about those 2,500 systems when we talk about wormhole space. And speaking of which, slide 5 here, what makes wormhole space special? Among other things, all the systems in wormhole space are named J and then 6 numbers. So J 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 would be an example. They do not ever have any name systems except for one special exception, Thera, which we won't talk about today. They're all so that's where JSpace comes from, is that J at the front of the system name. Players do not appear in local chat unless you say something in local. So what we're used to, if you're in a big nom with me right now, you can look at local chat and you can see there's 33 people in there. You can check and see who is in system with you, who is in your corp, who is out of your corp. If there's any war targets who are in system with you, just by looking at local chat. In wormhole space, that does not work. You do not see any list of players except for people who've talked in local, and then their name stays in that local chat list for about 15 minutes. One of the first rules of wormhole space is do not talk in local and wormhole space. You're giving people free intel about who you are, and it's only danger for you. You don't get anything in return. So sites in wormhole space, the combat sites, and then also a lot of the gas sites, and also some of the data and relic sites are inhabited by sleeper drones. So the sleepers are a drone faction. They almost only exist in wormhole space, though those autosynthean lancers are also sleeper related. But these guys can be really, really dangerous once you start getting up into C3, C4, and C5 wormhole space. As a bit of context, when we ran C3 wormholes with the Uni, we would use fleets of 6 battle cruisers, 2 Tech 1 logistics ships. That was the composition we needed to take out a combat site in a C3 wormhole. So don't go jumping in there with your Thrasher thinking you're going to get a bunch of kills, right? And for anybody who needs it, I'm going to relink the slide deck real quick. Slide deck is relinked in lecture.etechuni in-game. And those slides are in lecture.etechuni in-game, so if you need the slides, I've relinked them in-game. Another interesting bit about wormhole space is that the wormhole space systems can have system effects that don't exist in known space, and those system effects can change how your ship behaves in that system. So a good example would be a Wolf Ray at wormhole system, where every ship in that system gets a bonus to armor hit points, small weapon damage, signature radius, but you also get a penalty to your shield resistances. So it's a good wormhole for taking armor tanked ships with small weapons. And probably the last and maybe the most important note on this slide about wormhole space is it's very easy to get trapped in wormhole space if you do not have a probe launcher. So remember to bring a core probe launcher when you go into wormhole space. Bring a mobile depot if you have to, so you can refit. You should also be bookmarking your way in and out, and we'll talk about that later too. But if your bookmarks go away, or if the wormhole that you bookmark goes away, you need a probe launcher, or else you can get stuck for potentially a very, very long time until you either self-destruct or, I don't know, rage quit the game. Okay, let's move on to slide 6 in the presentation. So let's talk about wormholes. So I was just talking about wormhole space. That's those 2,500 systems that are not connected to normal space via stargates. Now let's talk about wormholes. As I mentioned, a wormhole is it's like a temporary stargate that connects any 2 systems in the game. So wormholes can connect to wormhole space, but wormholes can also connect known space to known space systems. If any of you live in Solitude, you'll be familiar with high-to-high connections, which are one of the best ways to get from Solitude back to Jita to go do trade stuff. And you don't have to go through wormhole space to go through a high-to-high wormhole. Wormholes appear in all parts of space, so obviously if you're going to have a connection from known space to known space, it can't be in wormhole space, right? But you can also have a lot of wormholes are in wormhole space and connect wormhole space to wormhole space. At a given time, about a third of all known space systems have a wormhole of some kind. And all wormholes have limited lifespans. Most of them last for less than a day. Like I said, these are like temporary stargates. A lot of them last 16 to 20 hours and then they'll disappear completely. And if you jump through that wormhole and you're on the other side and it disappears while you're on the other side, you are stuck. Wormholes need to be scanned down, so you will not be able to just warp to them like you can warp to a Stargate, and you won't see them on your overview. You need core probes to scan down the wormhole before you can warp to it and then jump through. You can take Introduction to Exploration if you want to learn more about scanning for wormholes. Jumping in a wormhole may not take you to wormhole space. As mentioned, you may end up in known space. And if you don't like scanning signatures, wormholes are probably not the thing for you. There's a lot of scanning involved in finding the wormholes and finding the connections, and also a lot of the sites you're going to want to run in the wormhole system are going to require scanning. Alright, let's go ahead and flip to slide 7. Slide 7 in the deck here. We'll talk about identifying wormholes. Every wormhole, when you warp to it and click on it, every wormhole is going to have an identification code on it. So some examples would be B274, H296, Z142. The identification code will tell you what kind of system the wormhole leads to, but not which system exactly. And it will also tell you some other things about the wormhole. So as an example, a C140 wormhole will always connect into a low security system, but it could be any low security system. It could be Tama, it could be Sarlene, you don't know which one. That wormhole will allow jumping ships dreadnought or carrier size or smaller, and it will collapse after 3 billion kilograms of ships jump through it. So you can get, I think, 3 transits with capital size ships, or almost infinite numbers of frigates through. And it will also still collapse if its lifetime ends. So we'll get to different ways of collapsing, but you can collapse it via mass or via time. And it'll allow 3 billion kilograms from a mass perspective. Confusing concept here. Wormholes have 2 sides. They've got an entrance and an exit. The entrance will have a useful code, but the exit side of a wormhole will always have code K162. So if you're sitting in a Mignon on a wormhole and it says C140, that's the entrance. And you can tell it's going to low security, etc., etc. If you jump that wormhole and then you turn your ship around and look at it from the exit, say in Sarlene, it will say K162, and you can't actually tell anything about the wormhole from K162. Now that exit side only appears once somebody has jumped the wormhole. So a wormhole spawns with just an entrance, and then when you jump it, it creates the exit. But like I said, you can't tell anything from just looking at the K162 code, although there are other ways to tell what kind of wormhole you've got if you come up on a K162. And for those of you who are good at math, half of all wormhole signatures in space have to be K162 signatures, since every wormhole is an entrance and an exit. So if you find a lot of K162s when you're scanning, makes sense, right? Last bit here, you can't jump through a wormhole in the same direction twice within 5 minutes. This is called polarization. So if you jump through that wormhole from Mignon to Sarlene, you can jump back immediately. There's no restriction on jumping through and then jumping back. But if you jump through, immediately jump back, and then you're in a Mignon and you try to jump through to Sarlene again, you'll be blocked by polarization for 5 minutes. You'll see an orange circle around the wormhole and a countdown timer saying polarized however many minutes and seconds you have left. We may be able to have a look at that during the practical. As mentioned, folks, feel free to drop questions into lecture.etechuni. I'll go ahead and post the slides there one more time just for the sake of completeness. Alright, slides dropped in again. And let's go ahead and advance to slide 8. Apologies for the image here, this is pretty hard to see, but we're going to talk about wormhole flavor text. So the flavor text is what happens when you warp to a wormhole and then right-click on it and select Show Info. You can get a lot of really valuable information about a wormhole by right-clicking on it and doing Show Info before you jump through. So in this case, the wormhole itself says wormhole 0477, so we can actually tell most of what we want to know from that. But if you got a K162, and we'll look at one later, you can see the second paragraph in the flavor text, maybe you can see, says this wormhole seems to lead into unknown parts of space. That means that this is a wormhole that goes into C1, C2, or C3 wormhole space. If it was going to high security space, it would say high security, or low security, or null security. And then there's also dangerous unknown, which is C5 and C6, and another couple classifications you can find there. But in this case, leads into unknown parts of space means we know that it goes to C1, C2, or C3 wormhole space. Wormhole 0477 gives us even more information. It lets us know that this actually leads to a C3 wormhole space system. It has a total mass limit of 2 billion kilograms and a per transit mass limit of 3 million kilograms. And the maximum lifetime for this wormhole is 16 hours. Now, if we look at the last paragraph there, you can see that it says the wormhole is beginning to decay and probably won't last another day. That means this wormhole has more than 4 hours left before it collapses. So more than 4 hours left is pretty good. It means there's, from a wormhole perspective, plenty of time to go through this wormhole and then get back, since you've got at least 4 hours to make your trip. And I'm going to go ahead and drop the slides in lecture one more time. Yeah, we are on slide 8. Check lecture.etechuni for the slides. Now the second bit down there at the last paragraph, this wormhole has had its stability critically disrupted by the massive numerous ships passing through and is on the verge of collapse. This is referred to as crit. It means that a lot of ships have passed through this wormhole and it is about to collapse. One large ship or a few more small ships will actually cause this wormhole to disappear completely. So it would not be a particularly good idea to jump through this wormhole unless you knew that you wanted to stay on the other side of the wormhole, since there's good odds that somebody else will jump in behind you and collapse it, or you may even collapse it with your own ship. Alright, let's move on to slide 9. We'll talk a little bit about wormhole mapping. That's slide 9 for wormhole mapping. The wormholes do not appear on the in-game map. They do not appear in the overview. Wormhole space you can't really see on the in-game map either. And since connections change daily, it's really necessary to maintain your own map or use one of the public mapping services to figure out, like Karamuri is saying in lecture.etech, you need a mapping program to make sure that you know where your connections are. Anybody who lives in a wormhole is going to have some sort of map of what systems are quote-unquote near them in wormhole space. And the Uni also maintains a number of maps, and other corporations will as well. So Mercenary Coalition, my current alliance, maintains a small map of our part of Sovnol, just to keep track of what wormhole connections we have active at any time. There's a number of mapping tools out there: Pathfinder, Tripwire, Sigi, Vippy. Pathfinder is very popular. Tripwire is as well. And the Uni maintains a mapper as well, so there's an in-house Uni mapper for the wormhole campus and also for the other campuses to use. You can see a sort of an indication of what a wormhole map looks like at the bottom of the slide. So that C5 at the top of the slide, you may not be able to read, but that C5, it's J152820 is the origin system. And then from there, there's two wormholes out. There's a C3 to J124722, and a C3 to J111214. Those are the two connections from that C5 wormhole space system. And from there, those other systems have additional wormholes that connect to various places, so that map shows you where you could get to. It gives you an indication of how many jumps as well. Karamiri has pointed out that there's rumors about all of the major mapping services, including Tripwire, that they've been set up by various major wormhole corporations, and that those guys actually scrape what you post there and use it to, for their own intel. So if you post a really good connection to somewhere that they want to go, they'll actually see that and they'll know how to get to you. It's one of the main reasons I think the Uni maintains its own mapper is OPSEC. Ty is asked, is there a .lan equivalent to find recent kills in wormholes? What you'll find is that zKillboard works really well for that. zKillboard will tell you who's been shot recently in a wormhole. That's what I always use to check the wormhole and see if there's recent kills. Very, very important note at the tail end of this slide here, slide 9, that wormholes still need to be bookmarked in game. Without bookmarks, so this map is nice, but again, you can't warp to a wormhole until you've scanned it down. So just having the map doesn't make the wormholes appear on the overview, doesn't make it easy to get to and from the different systems. You need to bookmark the wormholes that you've scanned down so that you can still get to and from. Or in many cases, these, like with a map like this, these will probably all be bookmarked using corporate bookmarks. So your corporation would maintain the bookmarks, and you could use those bookmarks to get to and from. Go ahead and paste the slides into lecture.etech uni one more time, and let's move on to slide 10. Thanks for linking zKillboard. Okay, we should be on slide 10 in the slide deck here. And we'll talk about wormhole mass limits. Every wormhole has a mass limit, and what that means is that if enough ships pass through the wormhole will collapse. All wormholes also have a single jump limit, which limits the size of ships that can jump through. So most wormholes do not allow capital ships, and some of them are so small that they're limited to frigates and destroyers. So these are two independent numbers. So a wormhole is going to allow X number of ships to pass through, and you could usually collapse it with maybe 10 battleship transits or 2,000 frigate transits. But it's also going to have that limit on how big of a ship can pass through. So if you're trying to collapse a wormhole that is only limited to frigates and destroyers, you need to send through a lot of frigates and destroyers because you can't send battleships through to collapse that wormhole. The flavor text on a wormhole that we were looking at earlier gives an idea of how much mass is remaining. This is important to check before you jump the wormhole. If you see this wormhole has not yet has its stability significantly disrupted by ships passing through it, that's good. It means that there's over 50% of the total mass remaining on the wormhole, and it's going to be safe to jump. You're unlikely to get stuck behind unless you're flying a carrier or something. If you see this wormhole's had its stability reduced by ships passing through it, but not to a critical degree yet, that means it has less than 50% of its mass remaining. It tells you two important things. Firstly, that the wormhole is in some danger of collapsing, although probably not anytime particularly soon. But the other thing that you know from that is that somebody has been using this wormhole a lot. So if you're looking at connecting to a wormhole space system, maybe a C3 system, and you see a wormhole that's been used a lot, that means that somebody else has either jumped into that wormhole system or jumped out. So you need to really be on guard and check on your D-scan and watch for Lokis and other scary stuff when you get into wormhole space. And then the last category here is this wormhole has had its stability critically disrupted by a mass of numerous ships passing through and is on the verge of collapse. That's also known as crit, and that means it has less than 10% of its total mass remaining. Strongly recommended that you do not jump a crit wormhole unless you know that you want to stay on the other side. So that wormhole could collapse really when anyone flies a reasonably large ship through it. It could be done. Alright, let's move on to slide 11. Should add, by the way, that we don't go through all these slides. About half of the slides are practical, so we actually don't have that many slides of lecture left, just FYI. For wormhole lifespans, yeah, that's slide 11 here, wormhole lifespans. And so all wormholes last for a limited amount of time. Most of them last somewhere between 16 to 20 hours before they collapse. And the flavor text gives you an indicator of how long that wormhole has left. So this is independent of the mass timer. You can collapse a wormhole by putting enough mass through it to make it disappear, or if you just wait, the wormhole will collapse based on time. The flavor text gives an indicator how long it's going to be until it collapses. Let's look at this first one here. This wormhole has not yet begun its natural cycle of decay and should last at least another day. You think this would be the most common, but this is actually fairly uncommon. It means there's over 24 hours until the wormhole collapses. Most wormholes don't last that long, so you won't see this very often. And this is, of course, safe to jump. More common, you'll see this wormhole is beginning to decay and probably won't last another day. That's probably the most common status you'll see. It means there's between 4 and 24 hours left in the wormhole. It's safe to jump unless you plan on spending more than 4 hours on the other side. So this is usually considered a safe to jump status. Now, mind you, somebody could still collapse the wormhole by mass, so you're not guaranteed at least 4 hours. But from a time perspective, this is a good status. The next one down is this wormhole is reaching the end of its natural lifetime. That means there's more than 10 minutes left, but less than 4 hours until the wormhole collapses. As to whether or not this is safe to jump, if you saw the wormhole before it went into this status, so if you maybe stopped by and it said wormhole is beginning to decay and probably won't last another day, at, I don't know, 1600 you saw that status, and then you stop back by at 1645 because you're ready to jump, and it says it's reaching the end of its natural lifetime. Well, if you do a little bit of math in your head, that means that wormhole has at least 3 hours and 15 minutes left until it collapses. As you saw it at 1600 and it had at least 4 hours, and now you've come back at 1645 and it has between 10 minutes and 4 hours. So it'll have at least 3 hours and 15 minutes. So you can jump through and do some stuff. But if you just show up at a wormhole that's in this status, it could have 10 minutes and 1 second left. Right? You have no idea how long it actually has. So it's not usually recommended to jump this status of wormhole unless you actually saw it go into reaching the end and you know how long it has left roughly based on seeing it when it had more than 4 hours left. And again, if you're okay with being trapped on the other side, you're free to jump it. The last status that you'll see, and this is very uncommon to see because it only lasts 10 minutes, is this wormhole is on the verge of dissipating into the ether. It means it has less than 10 minutes until collapse. And again, you don't want to jump that unless you're okay with staying on the other side. And if you need to ask questions, go ahead and put them in lecture.etechuni. As is asked, is there a spot in the wiki with all the numbers I can copy and paste into the notes in game? And I believe we've got that under the links section. We'll check in a couple here and see if we've got some good links that give you all the different statuses. So stay tuned. Let's move on to slide 12. Slide 12, we'll talk about static wormholes. If you guys don't have a headache already, this is probably the point in the class where you're going to get a headache, just to be totally frank. So a static wormhole. Wormhole space systems have one or more static wormholes. And what that is it's a type, not an actual wormhole, but a type of wormhole that will always exist in that particular wormhole space system. So as an example here, the wormhole space system J100338 has a U210 type static wormhole. So what's that mean? It means that J100338 will always have a wormhole of type U210, and U210 connects to low security space. So J100338 will always have a connection to low security space. If the current U210 static wormhole collapses in J100338, either due to mass or time, another U210 wormhole will open a few minutes later. So there'll be a new low security connection. I noticed that I didn't say where it goes because you don't know. You could have a wormhole to Tama, that's a low security system. and then that wormhole collapses because it hits end of life and goes away. And then a few minutes later, you could have a new low security connection open up to Sarlene. So you don't know where the wormhole goes, but you do know that there will always be at least one wormhole in this system, and that there will be at least one U210 connection to low security space. Probably you've noticed this already, but known space systems do not have static wormholes. These only exist in wormhole space. And that static is fixed. So you can look in alatha.com/eve, you can look up wormholes. And if you look up a wormhole system like J100338, you can see what statics it has, because those static types are fixed for the system. They don't change. J100338 will always have a U210. It will never have any other type of static. One sneaky thing that people will do in wormhole space, especially if they live there, is they will collapse their static wormhole on purpose by putting a lot of mass through it, and that'll let them get a connection to somewhere else. So let's say you're a scary, like Laserhawks, you're scary wormhole guys, and you want to go shoot some people. If you've got a null set connection from one of your wormhole systems, and it goes to somewhere, way out in deep Sov where nobody actually flies, what you can do is you can get all your buddies together in battleships and heavy interdiction cruisers. Yeah, scary wormhole people. And you can push a bunch of ships through that wormhole until it collapses based on mass. And there's actual charts and math you can do to figure out so you don't accidentally get one of your battleships stuck on the wrong side. And what'll happen is as soon as that wormhole collapses, it'll start the timer, and in a couple minutes later, a new null security space wormhole will open up. And when that new wormhole opens up, maybe you get lucky and it opens up to like a really nice ratting system where goons have lots of big, shiny, fancy ships out in Delve. So you can get all your buddies together in your flashy, shiny T3 cruisers and go through and shoot a bunch of goons and get a bunch of loot. That's a common way that wormholes will find content and connections for themselves. You can also, if you've got a high set connection, you can roll that. So if you end up somewhere that's not frankly particularly convenient, like Boyston or somewhere like that, which is only really convenient for us uni folks and a couple other corps, you can roll that wormhole until you get a connection somewhere closer to Jita if you need to get in there and sell some stuff. Now let's push on to slide 13 here. That's a tough concept, by the way. This statics always give me a headache. Let's talk a little bit about day tripping versus living in wormhole space. A lot of players only day trip in wormhole space. You just visit for a couple hours at a time. I'm a day tripper. I don't live in wormhole space, but I do go run combat sites and do exploration in wormhole space. But there are corporations and players who live in wormhole space permanently, and even whole alliances. I mentioned Laserhawks. Karamiri posted scary wormhole people in chat. Whole Control. There's a lot of corporations that live out in wormhole space. They do that for a variety of reasons, and so things you can do in wormhole space. Cloaky and stealthy PvP. You can also do non-cloaky, non-stealthy PvP, but don't expect to have a whole lot of success. You really want to be able to fly a Covop's cloak in order to PvP in wormholes. Asteros are decent choices. Stealth bombers can work. Stratioses are great if you've got the money. There's people who just spend all their time hunting wormholes. T3 cruisers are probably the #1 choice for pure wormhole PvP though, because you can fit a Covop's cloaking device and they also can do a lot of damage. You can also go exploring in wormhole sites. There's good sources of data and relic sites in there. If you're going to explore in wormhole sites, you really need to go check this link I've got in here, forums, Eve Scout. Can I safely warp to this site? That'll tell you whether or not the site's going to be occupied by sleepers. So there's two kinds of data and relic sites in wormhole space. There's the normal ones that you would find in known space, and then there are sleeper sites. And the sleeper sites are not any better from a data and relic perspective, but they are occupied by scary battleships that will blow you up. So check before you warp. Make sure that it's on the list of safe sites to warp to. You can also harvest gas or go mining in wormhole space. There's some really good gas to be harvested there. They've got fancy ice in some of the shattered wormholes. Just be careful because most gas and mining sites will also have sleeper spawn either immediately or after some point, some period of time. So do be careful. You can run player versus environment combat sites. There's lots of combat anomalies, and if you know what you're doing, you can make a lot of money. I run with a bunch of guys called Wolfpack. They go into C4 or C5 and C6 Wolf Ray wormholes with confessors, and you can make over the course of a fleet 700 million ISK over 3 to 4 hours. So good, really good money. And there's also a lot of Eve lore in wormhole space. So if you go into shattered wormholes, you can learn about epicenters and about the Jove and the drifters. If you get into some of the really deep systems, you can find fascinating, like really cool stuff like silent battlegrounds. We found one of those a while back in Ram 1. I'd never seen one before, and I've never seen one since, but it's this huge data and relic site that exists in deep shattered wormhole systems. It has like 40 something cans in it, and it's this big battlefield that is part of some conflict from ages past, right? So there's some cool stuff out there if you're willing to poke around. Just be careful because it's also dangerous. Let's go ahead and flip to slide 14. I've got some useful links here. These, feel free to check these out. The first couple are the Eve University wiki pages for wormhole types and wormhole space. A lot of good information on there. I think that includes the text for the different time and mass remaining statuses for wormholes, so have a check there. We've got Alatha, which is sort of the go-to for looking up specific systems. Tripwire, I've got a couple of Tripwire links there. The first one is just Tripwire generally, so you can look up systems. The second one is Tripwire Torpedo Delivery Wiki Visual. It's sort of an ugly link, but what that actually is a visual identification chart. If you're good with wormholes, you can actually look at a wormhole in space and tell whether it's C1, C2, C3, C4, or C5. That's a little cheat sheet for that. We'll try to do that on the practical. We've got Eve Scout here. Eve Scout is great. They list all of the links to the special Thera wormhole system, and they will also help you if you get stuck in a wormhole. So if you're out in wormhole space and you get really stuck and you don't know how to get back out, you can contact them and they'll try to help you get out. Although it can take days or weeks before anybody finds a connection to where you are, depending on how deep you are in wormhole space. That second Eve Scout link is the link I had earlier for whether or not you can safely warp to a site. And then that last link there is Wolfpack.space. That's the Wolfpack fleets. They run confessors in C5, C6s, like I was saying, and they make really good money. So, and they also run, sometimes they'll run training fleets with catalysts or other smaller ships in C3s and C4s. So that's a good way to learn about random wormholes. Let's see, so what all questions do y'all have? See, Kel's asking about what C1 to C3s look like. If you grab that fifth link down here on useful links, you can actually see what the wormholes look like. It takes a little trickiness. You have to look at them in space and then kind of rotate around to get the right visual, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty handy. Ah, gotcha. Nice. Other questions? You can flip to slide 15. That's the Q&A slide, so go ahead and flip to slide 15. Please do leave me feedback for the class. I'm going to reload the message of the day so you can give you the actual link. That's a class feedback link. What question did I miss? Yeah, so that covers what I wanted to cover for the lecture. I'm going to stick around. Let's take about 10 minutes, and then we'll reassemble for the practical.